noises like someone surfacing from deep water. Hands full of leaves, breath a ragged rhythm. He checked his watch, and it was 3 hours wrong. He kept saying one line over and over. I was only gone an hour.
Listen closely now. This episode isn't about monsters. It's about how a crooked hour rewires lives. Do you feel that? The idea that time itself can go off script. I'm Samnang. This is nature's dread. Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on and let the world narrow to the sound of my voice. Tonight's story, The Hour Between Trees.
His name was Eli Parker, volunteer ranger, local by choice, habit-bound. He walked the preserve before breakfast, trail checks, loose signs, a dog-eared clipboard. He liked coffee black, creased maps, and the comfort of a schedule. The town trusted his clock.
On October 17th, I'll say the date because specifics matter, Eli left the station at 8:50 a.m. He told his partner he'd be back in an hour. At 9:04 a.m., his partner received a quick call. Then the logs go quiet until 12:07 p.m. when Eli walked into town, watched 3 hours slow, and sandwich untouched, as if time had eaten the middle. At first, the town offered ordinary answers, tech errors, a nap forgotten. But patterns gathered like storm clouds. Between March and October, there were 7 logged incidents. Hikers reporting lost minutes, a compass that wouldn't hold, a child's watch that stopped only when pointed at the birch stand. Small things, accumulative, enough to make people stop calling them coincidences.
They found practical traces, a camera jacket with 3 hours of black frames and then 1 blurry shot of white trunks, a radio with a single clipped recording that skipped the middle of a sentence. These are the kinds of details investigators like, measurements you can point to, and they were pointing at a gap that didn't behave.
I was only gone an hour, Eli told me once, quiet, like a man saying a difficult truth. He said it the way you say a prayer that might not be answered.
People in town offered other lines, memories folded in odd places. At the diner, a woman said, "My calendar started arguing with me." That was how she put it. A neat, human way of naming the disorientation. One-sentence truths that don't explain, but prove that the effect had reached private rooms and kitchens.
There are sensory things you notice when you spend time in a place. The smell of birch sap, the papery whisper of leaves, the way light folds between trunks. In that stand, the air felt edited, thin, like film over a window. Light missed its cue. Sounds arrived doubled or late. Footsteps echoed with a lag, as if the forest kept a copy and returned it slow.
I went there to see what pattern, if any, I could witness. I stood at the edge as dusk was folding and set a recorder on the log. I counted aloud, steady, deliberately human, because I wanted to measure a thing that refused measurement.
1, 2, 3. My numbers began to arrive like echoes behind themselves. 10 sounded like 9. 11 arrived braided with 8. The stand answered, but not in my voice. It braided numbers with the sigh of leaves and a clock that did not belong to any house there.
Do you feel that? The moment when something ordinary slips and you know it has changed the rules. That was the turning point for me. The place where curiosity had to become responsibility. I felt my own smallness like a window left open in a storm.
The town tried practical fixes. Signs, don't linger. Teams of 2, radios on, ribbons tied to branches, sensors mounted on poles. The reports came back careful and baffled. Anomalies logged, data that refused repetition. Laboratory tests couldn't force the hour to behave on demand. Experts called it a localized temporal distortion, Others called it grief dressed in science. None of that soothed the small, practical harms. Missed birthdays, appointments that no longer matched, relationships strained by schedules that stopped agreeing.
Eli adapted in the only human ways he knew how. He left markers, stones on logs, scratch marks, a ribbon tied tight. He kept his watch wound as an act of faith, though he no longer trusted it to call him home. When he came back once with his watch 3 hours slow and hands that smelled of dry wood, he unfolded a scrap of paper.
On that paper was a child's drawing, a clock with hands pointing not at numbers, but into the belly of a tree. The pencil was pressed hard in the center, as if to nail the image down. Everyone who saw it turned the paper over, like you'd check for a signature. There was none.
I want to be clear. The harm here is quiet and corrosive. It's not explosive. It's the way a couple argues about when the party was and realizes they have different histories now. It's a gardener who arrives a day late to a funeral, and the grief around the table moves a beat without them. The crooked hour rearranges trust. It makes calendars feel negotiable. And that, more than any impossible bird call, is what eats at a place.
I went back under the birches with someone else the second time. Safety in numbers, and because human hearts are steadier in company. We marked a route and left ribbons. We walked the same path at the same pace. The forest still folded the seconds, but now, with witnesses, the shape of that folding became a pattern we could describe, not explain, describe.
Here's where it gets interesting. The hour doesn't steal the obvious things. It steals alignment, the small shared facts that make communities whole. That is my working thesis, and I keep coming back to it. When shared time unravels, people don't just lose minutes, they lose the confidence that their neighbors and loved ones are sharing the same world.
The artifacts collected at the ranger station are unremarkable and devastating. 7 odd watches, a broken compass, a camera with a 3-hour gap, and that child's drawing folded in a small box. People come at night and run fingers around the pencil circle. They touch it like a talisman or a wound.
What do you do when a place refuses your measurements? You make choices, travel with a partner, set loud alarms, move your meetings out of reach of the stand. The community learned to schedule around the birches. You can call it coping or adaptation. Either way, it's a rearrangement of life to respect a thing that will not negotiate.
Months after the first report, Eli still walks the trails. He no longer enters the stand alone. He keeps the child's drawing in a top drawer, where sometimes he pulls it out and studies the pencil in the center, like someone reading a map of a loss. He never quite answers why he goes back. Maybe duty, maybe curiosity, maybe a stubbornness that looks like hope.
Before I finish, one more image. Imagine a clock drawn by a child's hand, the circle imperfect, the hands pointing straight into the bark of a tree. That drawing is both evidence and elegy. It says, something happened here that changed the counting of days for people who did nothing more than walk under leaves.
If this episode followed you in the way the hour follows its victims, take a breath now. Look at the clock in your room. Look at the trees outside your window. Maybe set an alarm twice. Maybe travel with company. These are small defenses against a ferocity that does not roar, but that quietly reorders life.
I'm Samnang. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe to Nature's Dread so you don't miss the next time we turn a quiet place inside out. Until next time, check the corners and pay attention to the trees near you. The hour is patient.
Good night.